Hi there. In this tutorial, I want to address the question, what are layers in Adobe Photoshop? So let's get started. The version of Photoshop that I will be using today is the Adobe CS6 suite. There is now a newer version, a CS7, and there are a few variations between the two, but not many. The same goes for if you have Adobe Photoshop CS5, that jump from 5 to 6, there are just a few differences. So you'll see on your screen a photo here. It's actually my daughter and our dog. And I'm going to show you how you would do a couple things involving layers. One would be how you'll create a new layer, how you're going to make a duplicate layer, how to merge layers, flatten your image, and how to change the opacity level of a layer. So the first thing that I'm going to show you is how you would create a new layer. The reason you would want to create a new layer would be if you wanted to make changes to a component of your photo that wouldn't necessarily affect the background image. So for instance, if I wanted to add text onto this image, or if I wanted to place an additional object into this image, I could create a new layer to do that. So in order to create a new layer, you can do it a couple ways. You can go down to the bottom of your screen here on the right hand corner, and you'll see the second icon in here, and if you click on that, you'll see it says create a new layer. And now you'll see in my layer window here, layer 1. If for some reason this is not showing up on your screen, you can go up to Window and select Layers. So you can see when I uncheck that, those layers go away. So I want to be able to see those. So Windows, Layers. Something I can do is rename the layer if I want to. So if I was going to add some text on top of this, I can title my layer here by just double clicking it and typing in the word and just press enter, and now that new layer is created. So again, the purpose of that is if you want to change something to your new layer without affecting the background. So let me show you how this works. If I were to drag out a text box here and type in a word, so you can see it says Photoshop. You make it slightly larger. We'll go over text in a later tutorial and how to change the font and the sizes and the colors and all of that. But for now, I just want you to get the basic idea here. So you can see this says Photoshop. Now, if I wanted to erase part of that, but I don't want to affect the background, because it is a new layer, it will not mess with that background layer. So let me show you here. If I were to erase it, it has to rasterize first. You can see, let me change this so it's stronger, the opacity. So when I erase this, it just is erasing that top layer. So this will happen on any number of layers that you create. You can have as many layers over here as you want, and as long as you have selected the layer that you want to make your changes to, erase, change the color, resize, whatever it is that you want to do, make sure you select the correct layer, and it's only going to affect that layer. Okay, so let me delete out that layer there, which all I did was just, I had that layer selected. Let me show you that here. You can do one of two things here. You can right click and delete layer, or you can just hit delete when that's selected. Okay, and the other way that you can create a new layer is if you are not quite yet familiar with clicking this or the Control N, you can go to Layer, New, layer. You can go ahead and rename it right from that dialog box and hit OK. So again, it's going to give you the same outcome. All right, so let's move on. To create a duplicate layer. Now, some of you might ask, what is the purpose of this? I use this a lot when editing photos. It's great for being able to see the changes that you've made and then being able to flip back and forth from your original. So to create a duplicate layer, you want to right-click on your background layer and select Duplicate Layer. You can name it whatever you want. Background copy is fine. Hit OK. So now any changes I make to this layer, it's going to affect this same layer that's on top, but when I click on the eye right here, it's going to toggle back and forth between that layer being visible or not visible. So right now it's not visible, right now it is. Obviously you don't see a difference because it's a duplicate layer. So when I make changes to this layer, so for instance, let me just throw a filter on here. Let's see. Okay, so you can see she and the dog are really blurry now. When I toggle off between that, you can see the original layer. So this is really, really nice to be able to, again, see your original photo compared to the changes that you've made. So that's really the purpose of creating that duplicate layer. Okay, so let's delete out that one again and create a, I'm going to go back and create a new layer. Actually, we'll do a duplicate layer again. And now with this one, there's a couple things that you can do. If I were to change this to a black and white photo, and I would never use this for changing pictures to black and white, but for the sake of time, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm just going to lower the saturation here. Normally I would go through several other steps, changing the curves, the hue and saturation, exposure, all of those. Again, we'll go over that in a later tutorial. Okay, so now I have my original layer, my background photo, and then my background copy, which was the duplicate layer that I changed to black and white. So you can see when I toggle off, black and white or color. Okay, so if I wanted to change the amount of black and white that is visible, I can change the opacity of that layer. And by doing that, I'm going to make sure that layer is selected, and I'm going to change the amount. So if I lower that to 50%, that means 50% of that layer is visible. The opacity refers to how much you're seeing of it. 0, which is nothing, up to 100%, which means you're seeing that full amount of layer. So now you can see she's kind of a muted color versus just the black and white or the full saturation. So if I wanted to flatten layers or merge them, which you'll use specifically when you have multiple layers, you'll see when you right click on the bottom layer you have two options: merge visible or flatten image. This is nice, the merge visible or merge layers, if you wanted to select several layers, merge them together so that if you're moving something, so if I have 5 different layers that all contain text and I want to move them but I don't want to move each layer individually, I can merge them all together, merge those 5 layers together so that I can move them all at one time without having to select each one and doing that individually. So that's what you do merge layers for. Merge visible, so if I linked off of this one or clicked off of that one, if I had multiple ones and some were visible and some were not, and I right clicked, that would do merge those visible ones. And then flatten image is what you want to do at the very end to flatten all your layers together if you want to save your picture as a JPEG. If you're wanting to save it as a Photoshop document so you can come back later and do more editing and still have those layers separated, then you want to keep those layers separate. Do not flatten them. And you want to save it as the Photoshop document, which is a PD or as a PSD, so that you can come back and edit later. All right, that about wraps it up for this first tutorial here on what are layers in Photoshop. Thanks, guys.